a keynote that I'm going to run through called Cultural Singularity and the Future of Web3. Now, I'm Mike Prasad. I'm the founder of Tiny Sponsor and Common Space. Common Space is a community platform for Web3 for every brand and community. And this keynote is my thesis based on what led me to creating my company, Common Space. And so it's going to be pretty quick. I'm going to cover some key points, but the key takeaway I want you to come away with is I want you to think about the basis of what I'm explaining and how it applies to your business, whether you're an affiliate, whether you're in iGaming, whether you're in blockchain. And so what is cultural singularity? And cultural singularity I define as the nature of what culture is, and culture being the programming language of who we are. It defines our behavior. The nature of what culture is changing so quickly at such a high rate across so many different audiences that it's beyond our comprehension to be able to manage directly. And you see that in social media, in TikTok, and a lot of other content streams. You also see that in micro communities around, whether it's around a company as an operator, or whether it's around a brand, or whether it's around a community online with friends and causes. And so let's break down what community is. I'm going to start with identity. So what makes you you? What makes you you is individual characteristics that come together in a unique form that make you as an individual person. And so those things must be distinct. It must be cohesive. You are one person, so you are a cohesive person. And then it must be visible to the clothes I wear, my hair, my outfit, define who I am. And it must persist. So I exist. As long as I'm alive, I persist, right? Persistence is key right now. So what is a community? Similar. It has to be definable. But community is defined as individuals coming together across activity and engagement. And that combination is what creates a cohesive unit. So cohesiveness, again, is here. And you have to have methods of communication. And so if we can't communicate, we can't have community. It must persist. So an example is if I know you, you have my name, you have my phone number, you know who I am, you know what I'm up to, you know my activity, and therefore, together, my friends make a community. It persists. So what is culture then? So culture is the extension of community. It is something that has specific meaning and has a collaborative format where the community together is creating and sharing. And that creates a persistent culture. Now, the idea that culture persists traditionally means a physical city, a statue, a piece of art, music. These are all elements of culture. But in a Web3 format and in an online format, algorithms can drive that because that creates persistence that we didn't really have before. So, getting to this idea of what is the future of Web3. Now, for affiliates, for iGaming, and for blockchain, there's different permutations of it, but I would argue the basis is all the same. Historically, we've taken commerce and content and used that to drive transactions, and that has been, with new technology like broadcast media, radio, television, film, that content has been broadcast, and ultimately, those are the elements of culture that persist. So we see that media persists, they're unique elements that come together to have unique form, and people adopt that, and that creates as a way of distributing culture. And so that eventually drives commerce, and so we use content to drive commerce, we use culture to drive commerce, and that results in consumerism. And so in Web 2, we've sort of had this evolution in the sense that now anyone can create, anyone with a mobile phone can create. And so it wasn't just a TV studio or a radio station that could create, it was any individual that can post online can now create. And so that created a new type of emergence of culture. So in Web 1, we had content going online. In Web 2, we really focus on commerce. We optimize this idea around retargeting, attribution. Affiliates grew massively with the advent of content and commerce going online. We perfected commerce, and we began this idea of social distribution. When the individual was able to create, we started creating community. And that was the end of Web 2 and the beginning of Web 3. And so in Web 3, we saw this idea that Web 3 is defined as everyone supports each other, it's community-driven. However, I would argue that we never actually valued Web 3 on community. We valued Web 3 ultimately on speculation. We valued Web 3 on driving sales. And so let's say all of Web 1 and Web 2 was entirely valued by commerce, e-commerce. Facebook, Twitter, all these companies were driven by an ad-based model, and individuals and economies grew up around that. When we get into iGaming and gambling, it's the same thing. It's ultimately this idea of a transaction that's being driven by content, an extension by community, by social. But we never actually built true community tools, and that's, I think, where we're at today. So in 2020, we had three major changes that took a behavior that we'd established over the entirety of the internet. Behaviors that were present in individuals and at scale. However, we never built models around it, and it forced it to become valid. So COVID, for example. COVID said every single person in the world at once now values virtual engagement, virtual work in the same way that physical work can happen. So we said, hey, we're allowed to go to the office. We're also allowed to work online and work remotely. And in a lot of cases, equally valid engagements. Meeting someone for the first time might have happened online over COVID. So we started valuing this idea that virtual things had similar value to physical things. Another big change that happened in 2020, and every affiliate in the room will know this, is IDFA and privacy laws. Attribution broke. Paid marketing broke. And so the entire basis of value of the internet up until 2020 broke. And so what that meant is that with privacy changes, if you have an iPhone, you have a notification when you install a new app that says, do you want to share your data? The ability for someone to retarget long-term, the ability for someone to attribute a transaction and get paid out as an affiliate long-term broke. What it also means is that for iGaming, for anyone on blockchain, those models of growing became less effective. And you'll see that today in a lot of your ad campaigns, where you start seeing your attribution, your paid traffic becoming more expensive, less effective, less data, less visibility on what's going on. And the last thing that was really big that sort of came to fruition in 2020, 2021 was individualized algorithms. So TikTok, again, being the best example of that. First-party environments optimize your feed to be so individualistic that your feed was so different than anyone else's. And that is the persistence that creates individualized culture at scale. And so we have this shifting basis of culture, the shifting basis of identity from a model that existed from the beginning of human society until 2000, and a model that was emerging in the last 20 years. In this model, what that means is the basis of who we are, the basis of our behavior, the basis of our activity, what we pay for, what we value, is all changing to a different model. And what I mean by that is we go from a geography-based societal model, where cities, where we were from, our neighborhoods define our identity. So if you're my age or older, you're going to be largely defined by where you grew up, your community, your family, the people around you. Those are the people, those physical engagements are what made you who you are. The places you were. If you traveled, you brought in your horizons, you expanded your personality and your experiences. Now we're in a societal, intent-based societal culture. It's never been easier to create a business or content. And as a result, especially with algorithmic distribution, who we are as an individual becomes more unique, more stratified. We go from a homogeneous culture to a heterogeneous cultural structure. And so what that means is that the nature of what we value changes, therefore the nature of commerce changes, what we pay for. Everyone's heard about millennials valuing experiences as much as physical things. But what that translates into is also that what we pay for changes, and the idea of what luxury is isn't just a company that's been around for thousands or hundreds of years. It could also be an experience or something different. So we shift sort of from a consumerism societal commerce system to one that's based on this idea of shared values, of community, of creation. And that is arguably one of the biggest compelling factors of Web3. The problem is that our business models never match that. So when all these changes happened, we had this idea that we had commerce, we had companies that existed, a factory made a product, people bought those products, people wore them, people saw them, and eventually we said, oh, that product's really cool. They made some advertising, that creates content. And the community of a business is largely a byproduct. It's something that happens, and when social media happened, it was, oh, it's our following, it's on social media. And so we had this idea of a creator economy, and the reality is there is no creator economy. There's an e-commerce economy that is distributed by creators, by affiliates. Now, what we move to is the opposite, and we've seen this effects in the last couple of years, where things that happen in the real world start in a meme or in a trend. We see social movements happening online that then manifest physically. And so we're actually in a community-centric model right now, but we need to shift our e-commerce models and our business models to match that. So I'd argue that where we used to have majority cultures that became the majority of any country or any demographic, now we have many, many microcultures together as a network. And so every business should understand that we are now in a community-centric model, and then build their content in their community to integrate into that to drive their business. And so virtual can drive physical, as well as physical drive virtual. And it's an integrated model versus a linear model, where it's commerce, content, community. It's actually community-centric driving all three together. And so with every technology adoption arc of the web, of whether it's broadcast, the printing press, the internet, social media, we have these bubbles of experimentation, maturation, and optimization. Experimentation is always the first phase. We take something that is technologically, mechanically new, content going online, social media being distributed, algorithms, and we implement them in a way that is using the new capabilities, but valuing it on the previous model. And so blockchain, crypto, NFTs in the first generation was a perfect example of this. We took these digital things that had all these unique capabilities and valued them based on the type of business models we knew, which is speculation, driving commerce, stuff like that. Things that were old school models. Now, eventually those things crash. We saw that in the Web 1 bubble, the Web 2 bubble, we've seen that in the Web 3 bubble. It crashes. But when it crashes, the money that was made goes into maturation, and a lot of that money funds experimental models that find their actual use case, that use the technology in a way that makes sense. And so the result is that we get, and so those companies, that's where the billion-dollar companies are made, and then those companies dominate for the next 5 to 10 years, and they'll optimize. So that's when Facebook was created, when Google was created, in the respective phases of the web. And so I would argue the future of Web 3, if you want to consolidate all of this, is that we're moving into a creator-centric integration where we use algorithms to distribute content, and that creates unique communities. And the businesses, whether you're an affiliate, whether you're an operator, you have to own your community. You can't rely on the continual treading water of pulling traffic in to drive a conversion, to then drive a transaction, and having them leave and churn. You can't afford that because the data isn't there. The attribution, the IDFA, the privacy changes means that that model is now broken, and you'll see decreasing returns until it becomes ineffective for your business. And you have to create this idea of value, both digital and physical value. And so there's 3 areas in Web3 that are, I think, important. Unifying infrastructure. This is where the foundation of creating these tools that connect together to allow interoperability are important. Integrated environments. This is where operators, iGaming is in particular, is a really great area. You create a first-party environment where you have the engagement and you're able to derive value out of it, create utility there. And then digital real interplay, this is where the payment providers will become very critical. Transferring created value, whether it's monetary value, whether it's experiential value, in and out of the different ecosystems, whether it's from an operator's environment to something else, whether it's from blockchain to real world, et cetera. And so 3 conclusions around each respective audience. And so for affiliates, more and more affiliates are going to be unable to rely on attribution. They're driving, and this is happening right now. Affiliates are driving tons of traffic, but they're not getting paid out for it because there's a data gap, there's an attribution gap. So if it doesn't convert very quickly, they don't see the attribution on the buyer side, and they don't get paid out. And so as a result, right now, affiliates are playing a losing game. Brands have an advantage temporarily. Affiliates need to manage their engaged audience. They need to actually own that engaged audience and mature them and only convert when that maturation is ready to convert and be attributed immediately to get paid out. But that long term, they need to understand how to own their communities and make it a recurring asset. iGaming. iGaming is purely an experience monetized by gambling. So think about it that way. What is your experience? What makes your experience unique? Because that's what's going to create the community around your experience that you can keep and minimize churn. And you can create other ways to monetize. And there's a lot of opportunities in using Web3 to create ubiquitous loyalty systems to connect different operations to minimize churn and optimize value per player. And for blockchain, we're moving from a model that goes from speculative value to clear utility value that impacts the other 2 areas, where blockchain must focus on this idea of creating immediate real-world value or digital utility that feeds into real-world value. And the value should be based on that. So a lot to cover in a little over 10 minutes. But if you're interested in downloading these slides, you can hit me up. This is my contact information. Hopefully, these ideas will guide you in your business, whether you're an affiliate, whether you're in blockchain, and whether you're in iGaming. I'm Mike Prasad. Thank you so much.